237.
Different.
Yeah, there you go. Welcome back to the NutriMedical Report, and one of our favorite and regular guests is Tim Alexander, Lord Sterling, and he's got all these fancy titles, which I find a little funny because he's an American, let's put it that way. Yeah, his family funded the American Revolution with George Washington. So,
the last person that claimed they earled him did. He's not a direct ancestor, but he's a kinsman.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, that aside, I want the areas in which I find you particularly expert.
Oh, and by the way, I don't walk around my home in Evansville, Indiana, calling myself His Lordship or Lord Sterling. They'd come after me with a butterfly net if I did.
Yeah. Well, if you go back in family histories, for example, you'll find a lot of people have royalty of one type or another. My name, Bill Deagle, actually is from Guillaume d'Aigle, who was the nephew of Louis XIV. Who took care of the Port Royal in Fort Anne and was eventually drawn and quartered by the British. Okay, he also has his wife was the first cousin of Queen Anne of Scots. Okay, and she was a Stuart. So, and if you go back to them, also directly related to the Habsburgs and all that stuff. So what? When you go back 300 or 400 years,
there were a couple Habsburgs. They were so interbred that one of them actually had a tail.
Yeah, well, anyway, what happens is that exactly, no wonder. Well, that's not unusual.
While we're on this silliness about politicians and all, the King of Spain has announced that he's going to abdicate, Juan Carlos. And if you look at a picture of him, he's a Bourbon, and his picture from the side, the profile, is a splitting image of engravings of King Louis XVI of France, the guy that lost his head from the side.
Well, they're all very similar. That's why if you actually look at pictures of the czars and czarinas of Russia, because they often had Germanic kind of interlocks, because we have to realize that the Queen of England and all of their children are all basically Germanic.
Yeah. So, of course, there's always the question about, is their ancestry really what it was said to be? Okay. I told, I won't mention which Earl it was, but a friend of mine who's a Scottish Earl, I was sitting with him having tea in front of his ancient castle, and I told him this was a Burke's Peerage joke about the young man inherits a dukedom, and he's very proud of himself, and at the big ducal castle, he invites the local townspeople in, and, they're all lining up, and he's the 15th Duke of Sessenches, and there's the portrait of his father, the 14th Duke, and then the portrait of the 13th Duke, and so forth. And he's standing with his nose up in the air, and this young guy who's obviously a clodhopper from the village, and he's poor, and he comes in, and he's a splitting image. He could be almost his twin brother, certainly his brother. And he says, "Oh, Your Grace, we really do look a lot alike." And His Grace says, "Well, I suppose there's some resemblance, perhaps. Your mother worked here in my father's time. Maybe she was an upstairs maid." He said, "Oh, no, Your Grace, my mother was never in the castle. But my father, he was your mother's footman and never left her side for about 20 years. So much for the 14th Duke and the 13th Duke and the 12th Duke.
I'm going to say a little aside.
And my buddy laughed so hard he almost fell out of his chair.
I'm going to say something that may be a little shocking to you, but it's going to be a little revelatory. A lot of time people don't know what box to put Deagle in. Okay, I'm a scientist. I'm a physician. I'm a teacher in the Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, environmental, and expert in many different areas in terms of medicine, anti-aging, etc. I worked as a occupied doctor, working with the federal government on FBI and CDC projects, Operation Top Off and Dark Winter, had Q-level security clearance. But on the spiritual side, I've had some very unusual experiences. And one of the most unusual was 22 years ago when my wife was pregnant with my daughter and I didn't know it. And I was having problems. It was a start. I'd been working and I had gained a little bit of weight, and I started snoring. So I slept in a different part of the house. And I woke up bolt upright. First thing in the morning was
been there, done that, but most husbands probably have.
Yeah, let me finish the story. Anyway, so I woke up bolt upright, and standing right in front of me, and this is in broad daylight, was I would say, looked like a Frenchman in about a $5,000 tuxedo, and he says, "It's wonderful to see you, my son." And of course, slim, dark hair, not a gray hair on his head, looked like he was in his mid-50s. And he says, I said, "You're not my father," because my father was slim, but he was, my father was about 5'7.5", 5'8", and slim, never heavy in his life. But this man was, and he says, "I'm the Pindar." And I knew immediately in my spirit, I had a kind of wrench. I knew that this was bad. I didn't know exactly what it was, but, and I said, "How did you get in here?" Get into my house. At the time I came back from Georgia. I was working in the Augusta Regional Trauma Burn Unit and had a private practice in Augusta, Georgia, and I come back to Nova Scotia. I was one of the only doctor for the Halifax International Airport, now the Pratt & Whitney Generic Parts Plant, and they had a DARPA offshore directed energy weapons research project going on in their plant when they had a big accident. Anyway, so I just knew in my spirit, I discerned, because I had a spirit of discernment, that this is very evil. So he described it, he says, I'm about to ascend, and I want you to take over my position as the Pindar. Okay? And he says, because we know your genetics and your genealogies. In other words, he had my genealogies, which, of course, I'm related probably on 4 sides to royalty in Europe, which means I've been sufficiently cursed by my ancestors. And now you have to understand this. You have to understand this, that no one moves forward in royalty unless you're cursed by your ancestors. The most powerful thing you can do is not mass murder, not abortion. It's to curse your blown bloodline itself.
And it takes a real demonic jerk to do that.
No, all the royals of Europe, all of the ancient peoples from Sumer and Egypt, etc., curse their bloodlines. And that's the most powerful thing you can do, is to curse your bloodline. It's worse than pedophilia. It's worse than mass murder, abortion. The most evil thing you can do is curse your bloodline. And so he had dibs on me. Satan says, "I got the paper right here, man. You're my ticket." So I said, "No, I'm not going to do that." And I said, "I rebuke you in the name of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And he got real angry. He says, "I'm going to kill you for writing Clay and Iron." Now, Clay and Iron was on my laptop in my bedroom, and no one knew except my wife. So he knew about my book that I was writing, that I received face down on a concrete floor in 1988. That's a long time ago. Face down on my floor in my basement on the concrete over 2 days, where I was basically out of it, sackcloth and ashes. I didn't know, because I wasn't a Bible scholar, I didn't know where the book of Isaiah was. So when God dictated this to me, I literally audibly heard it and wrote it down. Okay? So that's how I received it. And so when God warned me, he said, someday when you're a Hebrew, Greek expert, and you know all these things, people say, "Oh, you're so brilliant," and you need to rebuke them and tell them that you received it entirely, including the prophecies, from the mouth of God, just like your ancestor Moses, because I'm a direct blood descendant of Moses, through my mother's family, who were called Nemah, the Niami tribe, which is the tribe of the blood descendants of Moses, not the other Cohens, but the actual tribe of Moses. Okay, so, and that they lived in Lebanon right through to the last century, and they came here as goldsmiths and jewelry experts, going back thousands of years. So they made the breastplate for the high priest was made by my ancestors. So anyway, so I rebuked him, and he said, "I'm going to touch your baby girl's heart." I said, "I don't have a baby girl. I had 3 boys, Matthew, Stephen, Christopher." And I thought, I had this really awful feeling. Like I said, "Well, my wife's not pregnant." And he started laughing really hard. A real demonic laugh, even scarier than Hillary Clinton when she heard about the steel rod shoved.
Well, that's pretty scary.
Yeah, this is broad daylight now. He's like 4 feet from me. He's not like an apparition in my head. He's right there physically, right in front of me. And I rebuked him. I said, "I rebuke you in the name of God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And all of a sudden in a vortex, he just said, "Phew." And I could feel this like awful feeling. So a few weeks later, I'm sitting in the Isaac Walton Killam Hospital ultrasound room, and I was trained under Dr. McMillan. I was one of the first trained doctors in the world on ultrasound evaluation. This is back in the 70s, before any doctors were trained, obstetricians or otherwise, in ultrasound. I was an ultrasound-trained doctor doing research with Dr. McMillan. And as I sat in the ultrasound room, the technician moved over my wife's abdomen because she was pregnant. I did the test that morning, and she was pregnant, and my mouth dried up, and I said, "Oh, my God, my wife is pregnant." The center of her heart was missing because she had a cardiac cushion defect and nuchal thickening, and I knew that her heart was touched, and she had Down syndrome. I've got my magnesium hydrogen stick in my water, so you hear clinking. No, I got lots of warts, but I'm real. I've got unusual talents, probably very unusual. I was recruited from grade 11 into plasma nuclear physics at MIT. I turned down the scholarship. I was recruited in 77 to work on the World MS Tissue Repository at UCLA and 4 different DARPA projects for the Super Soldier, which I turned down. And in the 90s, I actually had security clearance at the Q level, which is the same as a president, to take care of employees working at U.S. Space Command, Strategic Defense, and Star Wars. So I know the intimate first-hand details of some of the most horrendous things ever described in history. And much of it I can't even tell you because it's so awful. So what you have to understand out there is you're not going to find anybody like me on planet Earth that has ever lived. Okay? Not that I'm so wonderful, because it's a good thing that I'm saved by the blood, because believe me, without the blood of Jesus, I would have been a horrible monster. And I realize that without the saving blood of the Jesus Most High God, with my talents and my predilections and the curses that my ancestors gave me, I would have been a horror. And I'm saved by the blood, and I'm on fire for God and for Jesus, and I will do everything I can to save my brothers and sisters from the fire of eternal torment. And don't believe that it's not going to last forever, or don't believe that Jesus and God isn't real. Let me tell you, He's more real than the air you breathe, the things you see or sit, or the circumstances around you. And this entire world is run through the Druidic Council and the Pindar, which is the phallic or penis of the dragon. And the Vatican runs every Sabbatean Jew on the earth. So they all want to blame the Jews. No, the Sabbatean Satanistic Jews aren't even Jews. The word Jew means praiser. These are people that are ancient Babylonian Satanists that pretend to be Jews, and they work directly. That's why they have the kippah. The kippah was given to them by the Vatican to indicate that they were under the authority. So when people see the little kippah for the Jews, that is a relatively recent thing that happened over the last 2,000 years, because all of the bankers, the burgomeisters through Europe, all of the Sabbatean Satanistic Jews, because it was a mortal sin if you charged interest. Did you know that in the early church? I'm sure you do. You could not charge interest. It would actually give you a mortal sin to go to hell. But the Jews would do that as a proxy for the popes that would put a wall between them and the Vatican, because they always had this kind of thing. But the direct interaction with Satan and his fallen ones is the Vatican. They run everything. He is the king of earth. He has literally the titles of the Antichrist right on his helmet, which is the 3 crowns. The crown of the Most High God in the heavenlies, the second heaven, which is where Satan and Lucifer and the mid-demigods exist, and the third crown is here, the lake of fire. We are literally in the lake of fire. And people don't have to understand this. This is not just a geopolitical game going on. This is not a scientific and technological game like Ray Kurzweil. This is a game of Lucifer, a super intelligent, the most intelligent created being that ever existed, crushing mankind and aborting souls of billions as an astral sacrifice to get back at God. Because he presumed himself so great, because he was actually on contract in the sense to, quote, do God's will in this universe. And he revolted. And he revolted because it was found in himself that he thought he was so wonderful, so beautiful, as it says, beautiful in all his pipes, that he actually revolted and said, I shall send myself to the north parts and to the Most High God. And he was not. He was cast out of the third heaven, but he exists in the second heaven, which is the heaven, 7 dimensions of hyperspace we call the spirit realm. But it says, woe to you, earth, and you see, for the devil has come down to you. And if you think it's just politicians like Hillary Clinton or minions like George Bush or these Bilderbergers meeting, no.
You're picking on Hillary again. Listen, Hillary will save us money. I'm telling you, if we get elect her president, we can retire Air Force One. She'll just fly broomstick one.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
I think you're right.
No, you're right.
I want people to understand that you know, people are going to nibble around the edges of this, okay? They're going to nibble their edges around Armageddon. It's a lot more than a nuclear war. We're in a spiritual and a cosmic battle for the 7 billion souls. We are in the larval state of humanity.
And you cannot begin to understand what is happening if you don't understand it as a spiritual warfare. Because it doesn't make sense. You get to the point you say, why would they do that? That's crazy. That doesn't make sense from their perspective.
And by the way, these things aren't just spiritual. Not just like, Flip Wilson coming down in your head. We're talking about like the Nibiru. Mankind has been messed around with genetically, spiritually, geopolitically for probably 500,000 years. We've been messed around with. And the latest Adam man, which is Adam, was a recreation. It says that the sons of Adam literally went to the land of Nod and gained wives. In other words, they were, quote, human or humanoid beings that were here before Adam that were failed, and that's what the sons of Cain took their wives from. We're dealing with a fallen civilization. In fact, the research there, Ron Wyatt did work and found that his evidence indicated that Adam was probably, what we call nowadays, would be a giant 18 feet tall, and his wife was probably 13 to 14, Eve. We're dealing with a fallen race. Genetically, they lived 1,000 years, and that's without supplements. They eat good organic food. We have a fallen world.
They didn't have Dr. Deagle supplements, but they still live that long.
Right. Well, you'll live longer and healthier if you take our Nutrimeds, because the world is so deadly. In other words, our analysis...
It is a very deadly world.
Yeah, our analysis, this is by the top experts, and I'm going to get Dr. Ray back on, indicates that in the fourth generation, all mammals in our current toxic world can't reproduce. We are now approaching that in the next 15 to 20 years, even if there's not a nuclear war or anything, human beings will basically be dumbed down and sterile.
Yeah. Well, so why would you do that? And the answer goes to the spiritual battle.
Right. And in other words, if you don't get into the spiritual, which is one of the things I most appreciate you, Tim, you not only have the geopolitical and the military experience, but you appreciate the fact that trumping everything is a spirituality.
Absolutely.
Trumping everything.
Absolutely.
I don't care how brilliant you are.
And if you don't understand kind of quantum physics as the super holographic universe model, everything is connected. Okay. But from a Christian's perspective, because the connecting point is God. Right. Everything comes from God. We're the living thought of creation of the Most High. And God is the center of everything.
Tim, I'm going to use that analogy and expand it a bit. Think of it this way, and this is for young people and people that know about video games. Think of it this way, God is the ultimate player. He's the only player. I call it the one-I verse. In other words, it only exists because it's in the mind of the Creator God. God is so great, He's beyond the dimensions. And so what He's playing is what we call a holographic, universal, and infinite video game called the one-I verse. And He's decided to take some of those players, which are His children down in this lower realm, the lake of fire, and if we let His Spirit, which is the Spirit, is God. I mean, we're a Trinity person ourselves, the three. The Spirit that's in us is not a separate spirit. It is God. It's the seed that allows us to exist. Then our soul fuses with that because we hear and do God's will, Shema. Then God not only preserves our physical body by resurrection, but He makes us an eternal one because He actually takes His eternal nature and actually fuses it with our soul. And we're no longer a mortal being. He literally takes us as an icon in like a video game. Okay, or a person in a video game, and makes us a player. He literally puts a crown on us and says, I'm going to make you a son or daughter of the Most High, and I'm going to take you out of the game, and I'm going to make you exist in eternity, in the highest heaven. And that's what makes Satan so angry. He's been cast out, and literally this lowly worm called mankind shall ascend to be the sons and daughters of the Creator God of the universe. And He hates us for it. That's what it's all about. Because the most brilliant created being that ever existed is enraged by that.
The premier independent talk radio network, the Genesis Communications Network, GCN.
The McLeod Stewart, too, which are also my family, and McDonald.
About the Israeli subs.
Welcome back, and I was reviewing the information on the Pope, and he's demanding right now the peace treaty, the partition of the Sinaculum and the other territories inside. I think there's something like 17 territories in the Old City, altogether 26 sites that they're demanding from the Israeli government. And people don't understand the state of Israel is completely a manufactured entity by the Sabbatean Jews, and the prescient power over them is the Vatican. The Pope is the king of earth under Satan. And people have to understand he is the Antichrist. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. This guy, the Black Pope, for 700 years, well, they had a white Pope. And now we're seeing the latest movement. Tim, I want you to get into the news because this is going to connect the dots here of these submarines.
There is a direct connection between what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Syria and Iran. And the latest news is that Israel is placing 3 of their submarines built by Germany, some of the best and most advanced conventional powered submarines on Earth, off the shore of Iran. Now, Israel has cruise missiles that can be launched from underwater on these subs, and the cruise missiles carry thermonuclear warheads.
Oh, yeah.
So that with 3 subs, there's enough cruise missile firepower there that they can basically destroy every Iranian city of any significant size.
Or any potential site where it may have centrifuges, hidden missile silos, whatever. And the problem is, you see, right now, we are a hair's breadth away from a thermonuclear exchange because these wars are all linked. There's a NATO deployment this month in Ukraine. There's the movement by Israel doing this, and Israel is trigger happy. They've had a division sitting there since the second term of George Bush to prevent Israel from just launching, without even consulting our Joint Chiefs of Staff, a thermonuclear war. The Israelis basically says, they worship the coiled serpent god. People have to understand they are not followers of the Most High God. They are Satanists. And the ones that aren't Satanists are secular humanists that would be closer to transhumanists like Ray Kurzweil. They believe in super science and technology and genetic engineering to create themselves as the gods or demigods of this world. And some of the most advanced genetic research in the world, weapons systems. If you went to Israel, it's like a wonderland of the most horrifying genetic engineering, cloning, weapon systems developed on Earth. And these people are brilliant and evil.
And the country's smaller than Wales.
Right, and of course we're also funding even the latest version of the Iron Dome and Patriot 2 systems, and the thing called THAAD, or Theater Air Defense, which, by the way, we had THAAD up since 1982, before the Gulf War, and they had to back engineer to get the Patriot system to deploy it because it was an inferior system before they actually started the war. So they declared it in 1990. It was in February, I think, 1991, we made our first attack because we didn't have Patriot systems to deploy.
Yeah, the Patriot actually, I would videotape almost every Scud alert and so forth during the first Gulf War. And we thought we knocked down so many missiles. In effect, after the war, detailed studies indicate that we knocked down 1, maybe 2 missiles. What was confusing our radar systems was Saddam Hussein did not actually use Scud missiles. We said they were Scuds. They were all Hussein missiles, which were re-engineered. They were the Scud, but re-engineered by Iraqi and foreign scientists under the Iraqi employment. And they made the fuselage of the missile longer to give it more range. But what happened as it was re-entering the fuselage, because of the stress on it, tended to break apart. It made no difference to the warhead, but we were seeing that, and we were saying, we hit it. Well, we might have fired at it, but we really didn't hit it.
Tim, I'll give you a little details here. You know what they did is the Israelis contracted, the Iraqis contracted with Saddam to a Norwegian welding trainer. And they trained like 50 or so welders, and came back in so many months later to actually upgrade these missiles, these Al-Shahid missiles, to make them Scud-like. And he came back and he said, well, they're even welding better than me, but they're still inferior. And so they had junk. And it was just enough to justify us attacking and crushing, because they wanted 3 things. They wanted, how the heck did our oil get under the Iraqi land, number 1. Number 2, they wanted the ancient artifacts, which talked about the ancient world and the Nibiru and all the ancient demigods, the demonic fallen ones, the Nephilim. And the third thing they wanted to do is they wanted to have control of this territory because it's part of, quote, Greater Israel. Israel doesn't want to take over these lands. It wants to control them. The state of Israel doesn't need to get bigger to control Iraq, which it does now, technically, because the pipelines coming across Iraq, even the sale of the oil that goes through to the Rothschild banks is like $2 a barrel, and it's sold to the Chinese. That's why the China Oil Company is now the 5th largest oil refining company on earth, and it didn't exist before Gulf II. This is all part of a globalist scheme, and people need to get it, and they have to understand the spiritual side of it. If you don't get into the spiritual side of it, you'll never, ever understand this. You won't understand the guy calling the shots, Mr. Black Pope, that wants to drive around in a regular car and takes all his fancy jewelry off and so on. This guy's the guy calling the shots.
Well, I disagree with that. I don't think he's that important.
Well, it's not even open to disagree.
I know a lot of people agree with you, so I don't have a crystal ball. Here's what I can tell you.
No, just let me finish this. Stop.
Here's what I can tell you right now.
Tim, stop.
Okay.
This is not open to opinion, okay? This is a thus saith the Lord. This Pope is the last Pope, and he's the guy calling the shots on earth.
Well, I agree. He is the last regular Pope.
And he's the one calling the shots. And the whore Mystery Babylon is the Catholic Church. Now, I was raised Catholic. I was a high altar boy right through until I was attacked in the hospital room by a priest at 14. I served Mass every day, including the Archbishop, even exorcisms. I had a special dispensation to even be serving in exorcisms. I was Catholic to the bone marrow. And I can tell you, after I was attacked, I went back to the church one day, and I asked, I said, is God here? And I realized that God wasn't here. I realized that people want to see God, and God will be anywhere. God can literally be in hell, but he can be anywhere. But what people have to understand is that the Pope is not a Catholic. There's wonderful Catholic priests and nuns and Christians that are raised Catholic in spite of all this stuff. They're fantastic people. Just like there's fantastic people who are even inside the Mormon Church and Jehovah's Witnesses and so on, because their intention is toward Jesus, toward God, trying to do God's will. And I realize we all have filthy rags in us. But the chief of all of them, now for well over a millennium, is the Catholic Church. And it says, behold, Babylon the great, mother of harlots and of abominations on the earth. It's the Catholic Church. And that also, by
abomination, is that like Obama?
Yeah, and that includes, by the way, the Protestant churches that still continue Protestant, even though they got some Protestant reform, they continue a lot of pagan worship, like the ceremony of the wolf, which is called Christmas, or the ceremony of Nimbus, or Ishtar, which is the ceremony of the multi-egged god of Isis. People have to understand that if you continue ceremonies or ancient pagan ceremonies that deal with fertility cults and the death of children, like Moloch and Baal, that's not Christian. That's not Hebrew. That is why when God rebuked Israel, because they would not only serve the Most High God, but they'd also do ceremonies for the spring sacrifice. And even the Star of David is the Star of Astarte, which is a human sacrifice. So when you see the Star of David over Israel, it means the entire state is under the
Most ancient Israelis did not know that star. That star is the star that was Magen David.
Yeah, but that Magen David was carried by that Magen David was carried by. That Magen David star was carried by the ancient peoples that were pagan. They were doing sacrifices of their own children before these fertility gods and demigods, astral gods of Satan.
Yeah, if you go to the Jewish Encyclopedia, it clearly says that it was adopted by the Zionists in the 1800s, and it basically was the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds' original name was Bar, and they had the six-pointed red star on a black shield, and Rothschild means red shield, and they are the apex of this global banking cartel.
Yeah, but they're still under the Vatican. The Vatican calls the shots. Mr. Pope Francis, when he says he demands a peace treaty with the Palestinians, when he says he wants these 26 sites in Israel, people in Israel are still boggled. Their minds are spinning. They don't understand it. He's the guy. When he says, I'm with such and such, every bank on earth that's a Sabbatean Jewish bank, which is basically all of them except the ones in Iran and Cuba and North Korea, they're run by his buddies. He controls it all.
His largest independently owned communications network, GCN.
So, in other words, I got a background, and I know what the hell these guys are, and you have to see the potential of evil in ourselves, too. Welcome back, and Tim, let's get into some more history and some more news, because we want to connect the dots in such a way that goes beyond just like ancient aliens, like on a direct TV
Well, in Russia right now,
start to connect all these
or in Kyiv, the Russians have just made a statement this afternoon that the Kyiv junta's indiscriminate killing or shelling of residential areas must stop. Now, what all this, and by the way, they've shelled children's hospitals, they've killed a lot of civilians, and, you know, well, I could go on and on, but it's really horrific. You've got a bunch of these neo-Nazi fascists, and I really shouldn't call them neo-Nazi. They give a Nazi salute. They basically are Nazis. Although it's amazing the new president, and the prime minister are both Jewish, that doesn't jive, but, you know, who knows? I mean, these guys are nuts. But what they're trying to do with Putin is to provoke him, to box him in, to get him involved so that he will invade. Now, when he invades, when or if he invades, then then it's it will tie down Russia. Remember, two things happened within the last year and a half.
That's a level one of space chess, and you're good at this. What it's doing is he's a player and he's playing out his role. We can't trust him. He has all the justifications that the Sudetenland was taken over by Adolf Hitler, and he's taking back Russian territories where Russian citizens are being shelled, like the Donbass, etc. What Putin is doing is he's becoming and unveiling himself as the beast dictator with weapon systems that can neutralize all of our weapons. So he's a prescient military power on Earth. Even though we have level 10 weapons that are beyond that, if we start a nuclear war, a naval war, or a conventional war against the special forces, the Russians will crush us. It's all designed to make Russia take back all of the territories of the Soviet Union. It's designed because, remember, the Soviet Union is a convenient control for specific territories in opposition to the West. And then ultimately they want to marry a marriage ceremony between the East and the West. So Princess Obama, and I'm referring to that because he's bisexual, and Prince Vladimir are going to be married by the Black Pope in a thing called a ceremony called the New World Order, which is controlled by the Sabbatean Jewish bankers in the Vatican directly under Satan. And if people think this is all speculation, it's not. They have to understand that everything is like a play being played out, almost like a multi-layer space chess, Shakespearean, drama. And the fact is, the drama right now of how many people from the Donbass kids that have put selfies up have to die, how many people that are going to be shelled, like the Georgians a few years ago, and then they move in Russian special forces to destroy the Israeli, American, and British SAS troops, etc. This is all for public consumption. This is like watching Game of Thrones. It's sickening. And the problem is people don't see the spiritual side, so they just see geopolitical. They think, oh, well, this is only geopolitical. Hoo-ha. No, it's not. This is spiritual. This is demonic. This is a level of intelligence.
Well, and it clearly is out of the last book of the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
The merging of China and Russia as in a economic and now increasingly a political alliance gives when the Bible speaks of 100 million man army, when it speaks of this army attacking Israel and so forth. This is coming, and China is the one with the vast numbers that it can supply. You can see 100 million man quote army.
Do you know that Mao Zedong actually used that quote in the Red Book? He shall raise an army of 100 million. He actually said it. My sister, who speaks 3 different dialects of Chinese, and she was a reporter for the Hong Kong Daily News. Her husband was a Canadian Chinese. His name is Fong Daniel, my brother-in-law. And the fact is that. They had a brilliant son, by the way, who had a plasma physics degree, PhD at age 18.
Wow.
PhD, okay? So what you have to understand is that Mao Zedong actually quotes Revelation 9, saying that he will raise an army of 100 million. Right out of the Bible. And he says, by the way, he says, and your wife, O soldiers in China, this goes right back to the beginning of the revolution, is in America, is in the West. He tells them that, and right now they've got an excess of something like, I don't know whether it's 40 or 60 or 70 million, it's hard to say, males, and they've taken off their one-child policy, but it's not working. You know what? The big cities, they're still doing one child. It's only in the country where they have more than one, and they've been doing it illegally for years. But they still have anywhere up to 60, 70, 80 million access Chinese males that cannot get a wife unless they go to Indonesia.
Well, nature produces more male sperm than female sperm because males were hunters and they were protectors of the tribe, the family, and so forth. So they tended to die off a little bit better. So there was a slight imbalance there that God designed in nature that went good. But when you intervene by abortion, and every second, third, and so forth child will be murdered by abortion, then you screw all that up, and you now have, and you're totally right, you have this enormous surplus of military-age males in China and certain other countries. But we keep moving. If you know history, and you know the history of the 19th and 20th century and how alliances are formed, it takes a while to set all this up. And this is what we're working on. As you spoke about, this is a play. It's a play because you have to get people fired up. You see, they want the masses to want blood.
And they have to also believe it. For example, I've said this again, and I'm going to repeat it. The Bilderberger meeting is three things. It's a marketing meeting to the billionaire minions to convince them that they're still in control, even though they can't control their bowel movements, let alone the world economy. It is a meeting to frighten the public, to say these are the policies they're going to do to you, and you're powerless, O people of Earth. And the third thing is out there is to tell transnational corporations to buck up and do what they say, even if it's self-destructive. So there's billionaires that have Airstream jets and islands and so on, and they're freaked out because they don't mind getting rich and famous and powerful. They don't want megadeath. They don't want to see the planet so destroyed that they can't even go out and have a breath of air because they
may be close to Satan, but they haven't gone down the rabbit hole completely.
Yeah, in other words, these people just want rich and power. They want to look good and have plastic surgery. They want billions in the bank. They want private Airstream jets and multiple homes in different continents.
I prefer the Falcon 7X myself, but I couldn't afford to fill it up with gas. But go ahead.
Right. So, in other words, we have rich, powerful, greedy people who are freaked out by the maniacs who want megadeath. And people need to start grasping that there's a lot of freaked out, wealthy people. I personally contacted a lot of them. I had one lady who was actually, you know, that castle up near San Francisco. What's it called? One of the wealthiest people in America. Mega billionaire. And their daughter contacted me through to a movie producer in Hollywood when I was speaking on flu in Los Angeles in 2009. And he asked me personally, because he's doing a kind of a ghost blog on my show, up on YouTube and other things. And he said, I wonder, can I make CDs of your talks and your shows and so on and give them to this lady so that she can make multiple copies and give it to all her billionaire friends? I said, by all means. So the billionaires that are decent people who just are greedy or want to have a nice, super fancy life.
Or in some cases just inherited the wealth.
Right, exactly. And some of these people are very decent. In fact, they're more decent than a lot of average people, but they're freaked out. They understand that when I talk about the spiritual side of this, because basically very few people either have the experience or the bravery to talk face-to-face about the fact, as a doctor and scientist, that I'm rational, and people will say, no, he's got to be crazy because this can't be true. No, this is true. In fact, this is a higher truth than even the medical stuff I talked about, where you can do imaging studies and genetics and so on. If you don't grasp the spiritual side of this, the geopolitics will never make sense. When you hear the statements of the Pope,
because the geopolitics is illogical.
Right. But unless you understand the spiritual, then when you look at the Bible, and the Bible says, oh my gosh, the Bible's true. Oh my gosh,
it is true.
It says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, against principalities and powers and wickedness in high places. People have to understand, when God wrote this through the prophets, the apostles, etc., and the major minor prophets and through Moses, the Pentateuch, it's real. This is not like made up, just so that this is a love letter from God saying,
we speak of heaven as eternity. We understand time as linear, past, present, and future, but that's not what it is in eternity. It's all there. God knows it all.
Right. The past, present, and future to God is an instant of His reality.
Well, the times are still crazy. It still makes a great deal of sense.
By the way, on Thursday,
get right with God.
On Thursday, I want you to host the whole third hour because I have an appointment I have to be at. So you'll be there, and you'll
will Chris be there? Yeah.
Yes, indeed. You're going to be talking to Mr. Chris, our
cool
expert. Let me tell you, just a disaster. Fukushima alone is totally trashing the human genome.
It's killing the Pacific, and it's moving onward from there.
There's no more pelicans. 20 pelicans out of 10,000. Many of the nests is zero, all across Southern California. We're dealing with a omnicide that's...
But the mainstream media is ignoring it.
Well, they're beyond ignoring it. They're actually trying to deep six it. There are people like me that are bringing up, like my book is almost done. This is facts that are scary. Oh, God, let me tell you, you better pray there's God if you don't believe in Him, because it's here now.
Henry Ford once said,